Hey, I'm going to make a quick video here about my brushes that I use while I'm painting. You guys are probably going to be not, you're not going to learn a lot from this. So the basic brush I use is here in my palette. I use the tool presets to keep track of everything because I don't like to bring this thing up. I have just a few tool presets here. If you have this check current tool only, that'll allow you to just have this small list of brushes come up whenever you are working with the brush tool. So 60-20 is 60% opacity and 20% flow. I believe the one other operand that's changed here is that my spacing has been turned down to 10%. That's what this looks like here. This is just black on white. I'll often turn this up to 80, so my 80-20. You can see it lays on a little thicker like that. So you might notice that it's a hard brush, but it doesn't create a hard edge all the time. That's due to the flow. What flow does is this is a single continuous stroke here. So you can see that the back and forth is required to be able to fill in all the way up to the maximum opacity. And we've got a little bit of an interesting thing happening at the terminals of the brush strokes here, where the edges along the top are very hard because they're all following parallel, all the stroke marks are following parallel to each other, but then as soon as they go perpendicular, you end up with these terminals that soften up. This means that if I am doing up and down strokes versus side to side strokes, I'm getting a softer edge on the top and the bottom versus the side to side. So the direction and character of the strokes I'm making influence the mark. That's a really, really big part of my overall workflow. I want to use brushes that aren't tricking people into making it look painterly. I want to actually use a brush in a way that creates a painterly look, and that's really, really easy. This is the vast majority of what you see when you see the marks that I make, and then I'm just blending everything down using the Alt key here. So I'll grab some intermediary color, and then I can do blending, soft blending with a hard edge brush. I have it on size flow, so you can see I can make smaller details by using nice light marks, and then I can fill in areas with a little bit of a harder press. This makes it really easy to do areas that are high detail, low detail, soft, hard, just with a single brush that does a lot of different things. It's really versatile. It's really good at organic shapes and clouds. It's not as good with hard edge surfaces, but that you might notice in my paintings that I limit the amount of hard edge stuff that I do, and I have lots of flowing organic shapes. That's a byproduct of the fact that I like to paint in this way and the tools that I use. So as I need a few other random bits, I've got a few other things in here. There's my cloudy brush. Everything else here is just stolen from an old Jamie Jones brush set. So cloudy is usually for if I want to make, if I want to break up some hard marks in a cloudy area on the painting. This will break things up in a more random way more quickly, and I can also use this for a really quick wash of mist or something, just to get a base down really loosely. Everything usually gets painted over. Flat is if I need something that has hard edges, I will use this flat brush, and that way it also giving me some kind of softer terminals, but it I don't have, there's a little bit of size flow to this also, which I always prefer the size flow. It feels more natural to me than the opacity flow. I've got hard, which is just at 100%. If I want to make hard marks rather than fiddling around with the flow and everything, I just go to my hard brush. My inky brush is for, this is another Jamie Jones brush, is if I want to draw loosely, and I use this a lot when I'm concepting. I don't want to feel overly precise. I want to start to read into the work a little bit. It creates that kind of like, really sort of a dry ink brush look. It has really distinct characteristics to it. You can see this raky shape coming off the upper left-hand edge of it all the time. That it tends to be a little too repetitive to use for any kind of finished painting work, which is why I use it for concepting mostly. new 60 was this attempt I had to recreate my 6020 brush, but add a little texture to it. I had a recommendation to do that, and so I took one of the Jamie Jones brushes and I adjusted it to be a little bit more like my 6020 brush, and I hated it. I found that I was going back in and pushing out a lot of the texture, or feeling that my edges were too soft. I wasn't able to get the hard edges that I want, that I get out of my 6020 brush. So I will occasionally jump in there if I feel like I need a little more texture. Ripple is if I want, if I am creating ripples on a watery surface. This is like a fast shortcut, just gimmick brush for that. Soft. It's my soft airbrush. If I want to soften things up a lot really quickly, I don't want to keep it nice and genuinely soft and not just painterly soft, I can pop in here really quick and get a nice big large soft brush. Splatter. You will see this if you look up close at my paintings. This is actually one of the biggest gimmick brushes I use. It's, I think, another Jamie Jones brush, and this gets used for any kind of textural pattern, sometimes in inappropriate ways. Anytime, I'm not really particular about trying to create a realistic texture most times, and so this ends up being sort of a stand-in for all kinds of texture because it's pressure sensitive as far as going looser or tighter on the amount of spray and splatter I get. I like it better than going and adding photo texture to stuff, because you don't end up with a lot of artifacting or weirdness that you can expect out of a photo texture. This is where I actually add, if you see any kind of brushy texture inside my paintings, it's usually this sponge brush. Again, this is from that old Jamie Jones brush set. And if I have an area that feels too loose or too, it's too well rendered and I want to break it up and make it look a little bit brushier, I'll pop in there with a little bit of this and loose marks here, because it has those nice open wide terminals to the edges of the stroke. It allows me to paint in a very similar way. It just creates this different texture on it. And again, I'm not like particular about imitating a very specific texture, so I just use the same texture in every single painting, because I'm gonna probably go in there and nuance it manually anyway. My brush list is getting longer. Over 15 years of painting, eventually it's gotten up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 brushes after 15 years. Yeah, I'm like old man Photoshop here. Starry is random dot patterns used for manually creating star fields or dust, or if I don't want to have that textured look inside of my random splatter from the splatter brush, the Starry brush is really good for creating star fields. And then I will sometimes tweak things like distance and spacing and scattering. But I mean, the scattering is basically all the way up. And this is, again, pressure sensitive, so that a light touch gives me the small dots and a hard touch gives me the bigger ones. And so I'll just work through, if I want to create a star field or a splatter or something, I will go through and I'll just manually tool it out with something like this. Tall. What is this? I never use this one. We can count this one out. I think I added this one recently when I was doing some urban stuff. You know, when you want to create hard-edged, I think that was it. I was trying to create some suggestions of an urban environment, and I needed something that was giving me a nice, chunky, harder look to it. I think I was also using this for calligraphy. It creates a kind of calligraphic look to it. But this is actually just a round brush that's been flattened out. I'm pretty convinced that a dedicated digital painter can do an entire painting with a round brush, and do anything, but also a really good digital painter wouldn't. I kind of just like to do everything manually and have each mark just be a little manual mark that I make. and have every little blend just, rather than using a tool that helps blend or do something automatic or have a brush that's got a soft edge on one side, I would rather just go in and manually just stroke in every single random blend, every soft edge, everything, just using a hard brush with the settings tweaked a little bit, adjusting the opacity using the number keys on the top of the keyboard. It was a habit that I got in early on, and I've been painting this way for so long. It's just the most comfortable way for me to paint. I don't recommend it as like the ultimate way to paint. I don't think that people who are learning to paint digitally right now should imitate my style of painting or aspire to use tools the way I use them. I just know that this is the way I feel comfortable. It leads to getting the results that I get, and I'm probably going to be stuck this way for the rest of my life because I'm getting old enough where the cement on my brain is starting to dry. So the chances I will add a lot of new tools to the mix over the course of the next 10 years seems fairly low. So, I mean, you can see it's if you just want to play around, the barrier to entry is very, very low with digital painting. I recommend setting something up like this 60-20 brush, and you can use that for blending, you can use it for drawing, you can use it for any kind of painting that you need. And you don't really need fancy brushes in order to get painterly looking work because painters don't use a lot of gimmicky brushes. They typically just lay paint down, and that's all I really do too. So that's 12 minutes that you're never going to get back. Thanks so much for joining me. Bye-bye.